Hi everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about trauma and how it affects the body. And I was asked by a couple of friends and clients, how trauma actually affects the chakras or the energy centers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my talk slightly different today, where I'm going to answer a few questions, but I'm also going to put on some diagrams about what I'm talking today. When I finish the live talk, I'll put it on there in the comments for people to look at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the three types of trauma and how they impact on the body, and then I'll talk about trauma from a therapist's point of view. So with trauma, there are three main types of trauma. There's acute, and that's trauma that is caused by just a single event. And then there is chronic trauma, which is caused by a prolonged event or severe event like abuse or bullying. That would be a chronic trauma. And then your complex trauma is a trauma that is triggered by multiple events. So that would be, trauma that would be maybe triggered, say, by abuse, and then maybe grief or loss. So those are the three types of trauma. And then I'm going to put some diagrams on here later on that will talk about what trauma is and the different types of trauma and how trauma affects the brain. Because when we go through trauma, it actually affects three areas of the brain. And then what happens when we're going through a traumatic event? And a traumatic event can be grief, it can be loss, it can be a change of circumstances, it can be abuse, it can be bullying. All these different things can trigger trauma. And then for some people, it can lead to more complex trauma like PTSD. So when we go through those traumatic events, the incidents that cause them, then the brain is affected. So what happens is you get, your flight or fright mode. So what happens is then you go into freeze mode. So then quite often what happens is when you're in trauma, your body actually, or anxiety, your body actually freezes. And then what happens then is when you go into that kind of state, you can also have memory loss, and then you can also have where cortisol, extra cortisol is actually enters into the bloodstream, enters into the body. So that's basically what happens when trauma affects the body. So I'm going to talk about it now from a therapist's point of view, because when we talk about trauma or disease, what we do is we don't talk about like disease like the person has a condition. It's like the body is not comfortable. So what happens is when you go through a traumatic event, what happens is the physical body is affected, the emotions are also affected, different emotions are coming up, the mind is affected. So then what you can do is when you do things like therapies, what they do is when the trauma gets stuck in the body, so when it gets stuck in the body, it causes illnesses like sciatica would be one. You can have, grief or loss can cause respiratory problems. So when the trauma gets stuck in the body, I'm also going to talk about the aura. And the aura, there are 7 layers in the aura. So what happens is the trauma gets stuck in the chakras, the energy centers, or it actually gets stuck in those layers. And that's where we want to go in with the therapies, and we want to actually get that trauma out. And the things that you can do to help with trauma are therapies, kind of therapies that I do, and then you can also do yoga, meditation, any kind of exercise. Walking is really good, getting yourself into a routine, counselling, having friends and family to support you. So when you have trauma, it doesn't mean that it just has to impact on the body and there's no solution. So that's why I'm talking about trauma today, because a lot of people, especially with the time that we're in right now, a lot of people may be, they may be experiencing grief or loss, or they may be in a situation where old trauma has arisen because they're out of their familiar circumstances. So basically what I wanted to do was in this talk was let people know that when trauma comes up, when we're feeling, fear is coming up, stress is coming up, all these different emotions, we can actually do therapies, take fluorescences, use crystals to help. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about how basically trauma, when it affects the body, how we can actually, if you look at the chakra system and the human energy field, how we can actually get that out. So because somebody had asked me a question, how do we know when our body is out of balance? How do we know when it's been affected by trauma? And what organs does it affect, and how can we bring back balance? So some people will know, they will know, oh yes, my body's out of balance, something has triggered me. Other people will not be aware, they will not really know why they're feeling the certain symptoms that they are. So yes, when your body's out of balance, you can bring it back by the essences, the crystals, the therapies. Some people will do counselling, whatever it is you do for yourself. So yes, when trauma affects the body, yes, it affects the brain, and yes, it can affect the physical body as well, the chakras, and so the chakras and the human energy field, which are both interlinked. So then what you do is you do the therapies, and they go in and they will release that. Because my Reiki teacher in America said somebody can have this one Reiki session and that can actually fix a chakra that is blocked or even torn. So that's the beauty of the therapies. So basically, when we're in this heightened state of the trauma and we're feeling it in our body, we don't have to just go on in our lives thinking, right, this is me, I'm stuck, I'm going to feel like this. No, we can actually know that there is help available. So when you go into the 7 layers of the human energy field, they each relate to a chakra, and this is where some of you may get lost. You may think, what's she talking about? So I refer to chakras as energy centers. So basically, when I talk about the aura, that's what's around the body. That's there are 7 layers around the body, and then there are actually a chakra for each layer. So when we when we actually go through a trauma, then the chakras can become unbalanced. They can actually close, or they can become damaged, and then the trauma can get stuck in those layers. So I found for myself, like I would have experienced anxiety over the years, and I've gone through quite a lot of my own life, and I found that doing the therapies is what has helped me manage to get this stuck stuff out of the chakras and the human energy field. And then essences, as I've mentioned, the flower essences, they work on a vibrational level, so they can work at a real deep level, especially the dark sky essences, which are a set of 4. These are very transformative, deep essences. So what they can do is they can work on a really deep level to shift that old stuck stuff that needs to come out. So what I would encourage people to do is I'm going to put the information after this talk in the comments section. You can go ahead and you're looking at the diagrams. There'll be one describing what trauma is, the 3 different kinds of trauma. There will be a diagram for the human energy field. There'll be one of the chakras, and then also when I talk about chakras, the chakras have petals. So it goes from 4 with the first chakra up to 1,000 with the chakra on the top of your head, your crown chakra. So when we go through trauma and different conditions that affect the body, then what happens is these petals can become shut down, but then they can also become opened and fully balanced by doing whatever work it is that you do on yourself, your therapies, your essences, your crystals, whatever it is you do to balance yourself. So that's basically all I want to talk to you about today. And I'm going to say, if you have any other topics you want me to talk on, just leave a little comment here of what you'd like me to talk on. If anything's unclear, please ask me, because I go into therapist speech, and then a lot of times people are like, we're lost, we're not sure, what you're talking about, we're not following you. So ask any questions. If you want an essence, ask me. If you want me to clarify anything a little bit more, because this, for me, I know, having gone through the circumstances that I have in my own life, I've seen how trauma and anxiety can affect the body, but then I know by doing the work that I do and using the essences that you can definitely shift through those, you can transform and come out the other side. So yes, trauma does impact the body, and it can cause memory loss, and it can cause anxiety, and it can cause a person to be feeling very much in a place where they feel very kind of stuck and uncomfortable, and they kind of feel like this is how they're going to have to go through life. But no, you don't. You can actually, even because I remember reading an article where somebody was talking about yoga and how yoga can really affect the brain in a positive way. So if your brain has been affected by the trauma, actually the yoga can help to rewire it, so you don't have to have the lasting effects of that damage. Because some people say, oh no, trauma affects my brain, that's not good. That actually there are tools that you can use to rewire that and reset, so you don't have to have that effect on the physical body anymore. So, and then also another question somebody had asked me was, does trauma affect mobility? And yes, it can, because when you're talking about these conditions like, your MS, your ME, your Parkinson's, a lot of those are, if you actually go into the emotional what's behind the emotional, then you can actually go into figuring out what is triggering those, and you can help to write those. Because I've worked with Reiki teachers who've told me that yes, you have a physical condition, but when you put the energetic, the vibration in there, anything is possible. You can shift anything. So I've worked on clients with cancer, and they get huge benefits from having the regular sessions. So I would just say, so somebody may have a very chronic symptom. I'm not saying Reiki is going to cure it or any of the therapies are going to cure it, but they can definitely help it, and they can ease pain that people are in. It can help with trauma. So basically, if somebody has a very chronic condition, yes, the therapies can definitely help. Yes, they may still have the condition, but it may not affect them in the same degree that it does if they add the therapies or the essences or the counselling or the yoga, whatever it is you do to help yourself. So yes, trauma can affect mobility, but by adding what you do to your life to help you, then it can actually be minimized. So that's basically my talk today on trauma, and I really would encourage people to read more on the topic, to ask me questions, to ask me about the therapies that I do, to ask me about the essences, because they really do impact on the energetic, the vibrational level. So that's what I was going to say as well, that I want to say to people in this time when we're in, where some of us maybe aren't working or we're working less. Some of us may be very flat out and we're working more. But if you have any time for yourself, take this time to go into those areas and use the essences, do the therapies, get this deep-seated stuff out, and actually be helping yourself right now. Because if you have that time, use the dark sky flower essences to go deep and to uproot what needs to be uprooted. So that's what I say to people now. If you have the time, work on yourself. Don't just turn to alcohol or food. Go outside, exercise, walk, do yoga in your own home, do whatever it is you can to take care of you. Because if we're well mentally and physically and emotionally ourselves, then we're going to be able to help those around us. But if we're struggling, then we're not going to be able to help those around us. And I know from experience, because as I said, I've been through quite a lot in my life, and I find that that's why I'm a therapist, because the essences, I do take the essences. I've been taking this brand of essences that I've been trained in. I've been taking them for over a year now. I do Reiki on myself. I receive Reiki. I've been doing this for 21 years. I teach Reiki. I love teaching Reiki. So I find that yes, when I'm talking to you about this, I know from experience, because I use crystals myself. And I know from experience, that's why I'm talking about this, because I know myself how it has actually helped me with sciatica, through traumatic bursts, different things, mental health issues, anxiety, all these different things. I would find that that's why I'm still on this path, because all these tools that I use have helped me to become a better therapist and a better person. So, and it's not just like you start the work and you stop. I'm always continually working on myself, and I always do the best to support my clients as well in whatever way I can. So please feel free to ask me any questions, leave any comments there, and I'll post the diagrams on there for you to look at. And if it doesn't make sense, please just ask me. So take care of yourself and stay well, and I hope this made sense, and I hope you get something from my talks. And I'd like to do a talk on the different therapies that I'm offering. I'd like to go through each week and just talk about one therapy in particular. I'd like to talk about crystals. And what I'd also really love to do is I'd love to do a 7-week series of going through the chakras one by one. So if anybody would be interested in that, just send me a message, because I love the chakra system. And today I've just touched on it, and I'm not going to go into it in any more depth, because it is quite a complex system. So if you have any questions or you want any more information, let me know. So stay safe and stay well, and thank you for listening, and thanks for your questions.